Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of For Checking TV. I'm your host, Doug Glacky, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Scotty Porterfield and Peyton Trollinger. And tonight we are joined by special guest, Danny Shirey of the Pens blog. Danny, how we doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited to talk some Pens with you guys.
Awesome, man. That's good to hear. So basically, we're going to do a little free agency recap before we get into the main thing I want to discuss. Dominic Simone's back, which for most people is awesome. And if you're in that vocal minority where you're like really angry about it, I'm sorry. But that's something we were talking about before we started recording. It's exciting that he's back just simply because he can slot in with Sid. And even though he may not score a ton of goals, he's so vital to the process of generating offense and generating scoring chances and keeping that line afloat in terms of just offensive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that, over the past two seasons, Simone has been very deserving of, a lineup spot really anywhere. But what we have seen in the past is that, even though Simone's not burying a ton of these chances that we see him get so frustrated that he's not putting in the back of the net, but he's a very cerebral player. And we've seen that, those kinds of players typically gel and do well alongside Crosby. And it's nobody's sitting here saying that Simone's going to be a 20 goal scorer on Crosby's wing. He might not even be a 10 goal scorer, but it's all about the process and, making sure that those underlying results are there and that you're generating those chances and limiting them in your own end. And, if the process is there, the results are ultimately going to come eventually. I know that doesn't, sit well with a bunch of people, especially, when you're looking at 6-game playoff sample sizes and wondering why Gensel only scored 1 goal in 6 games. But, the reality is that those things are all going to average out, over the long term.
Exactly. And I think that Simone's one of those players that, he's the perfect third wheel for Sidney Crosby and whoever that left winger may be, whether it be, Jake Gensel or Jason Zucker or anyone else, because Simone's going to get them the puck. He's going to have really good zone entries. He's going to be able to help them in the offensive zone. And it's really, honestly, it just makes it click. Like I can't really think of more things to say about it other than like Simone simply just clicks with Sidney Crosby, regardless of what way people spend it.
Yeah, exactly. And the other funny thing with it is that if he's not playing alongside Crosby, I don't necessarily know that, there's another spot down the lineup for him where I could see him, being on that third line, playing wing with Carter. I'm not necessarily sure that that's something that would work out. And, like I said, when I first started talking about him, he hasn't been great these past 2 seasons. And one of those seasons was with Pittsburgh. So, he might just be, past the point where he can be super effective, but it's nice to know that you've still got that option of putting him with Crosby in the back of your pocket.
Yeah. And speaking of other people who looked respectable alongside Sidney Crosby in a small sample size, Evan Rodriguez re-signed by the Penguins, 1-year deal. I mean, pretty good filler guy, obviously can play center. I think that that's something that they're probably going to have to look at with Malkin being out to start the year and them losing Freddie Gaudreau in free agency. So I think that Rodriguez is just a really solid insurance policy for any type of injury that may pop up beyond Evgeny Malkin's knee rehab.
Yeah, Rodriguez is really kind of that Swiss Army knife kind of player that a lot of baseball fanatics like to use about the middle infielder that can play outfield as well. But, I know a lot of Penguins fans have been, kind of disappointed with Rodriguez. He's not really flashy and he's never going to do anything crazy. And a lot of the time, if you're not doing those things, the casual fans might try to, try to turn on you or whatever it may be. But the reality is that he's a guy that's not going to sink you at either end of the ice. And, that's what you're really looking for in those depth pieces and those guys that are going to fill in different areas of your lineup when those injuries come up. And that's really important because, they're getting them at, a pretty low cap hit. It's a really low risk deal. And like you said, he can play all three forward positions. So it's not really a matter of, Rodriguez is a guy that, is going to be slotting in the top six all the time. But as we saw last year, we know he can do that. And he's not going to really have that much of a negative impact when he's there.
Exactly. And I think now, especially since they lost Freddie Gaudreau, whenever everything shakes out and the roster is fully like functioning, whenever Malkin is healthy, he's the perfect 13th forward to have because just like you said, he can slot in anywhere. He can play in the top six. I know another thing we worry about is like who can play with Aston Reese and Teddy Bluger. He looked really good during that time frame that he had to play with Aston Reese and Teddy Bluger last year as well. And I think that he's just a really underrated, important piece to this roster in terms of, where he fits and what they can get out of him on a consistent basis.
Yeah, most definitely. And like I already said, he's not going to light the world on fire, but it's extremely important, especially as the year goes on. And another thing that, I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, but the NHL hasn't played an 82 game schedule here in a couple of years now. So what kind of effects is that going to have on the players and teams going down the stretch and into the playoffs? So guys like Rodriguez that you can slot anywhere and he's not going to kill you. Those guys are super important.
Exactly. Now, we're going to move on to the player that I'm most curious about because this is a player who, had a great start to his career in Danton Heinen, got moved to Anaheim, and then kind of everything just kind of fell off a cliff for him. Obviously, he's still young. He's 26 years old. He has potential. I mean, he had 47 points in the 17-18 season with the Bruins. There were times where he was getting time with Bergeron. And part of me wonders, is he going to have a bigger part of this entire season and big picture than what people think he might?
I do think so, and I'm actually pretty excited about Heinen. I know he hasn't been all that great the past couple seasons, but after they signed him, I spent some time going through some film and just watching some of his shifts over the past couple seasons, and especially some of the goals that he scored. He's an incredibly smart player. Like he's not super fast, and he's not going to dangle you and walk into the zone and make a crazy move. But he's really good with the puck in tight spaces, and he can get the puck off his stick really quickly. And another thing that I saw is that he's a decent producer at 5v5 with the rate at which he scores goals and especially his primary assist rates. And I actually tweeted this out when they signed him, but I would not be surprised at all if Heinen ends up outscoring McGinn at 5v5 this season.
Yeah, and that's, the 5v5 scoring piece is huge because that's exactly what they're going to need in somebody who can potentially slot in on the third line with Carter, because, that's basically what you need out of a third liner. He's not going to get power play time. I would suspect maybe just second power play time, if anything. So just let him run wild at 5v5. I really like this signing. I'm really excited for him. And I think that, once we get deeper into this, like talking about potential line combinations and things of that nature, like we're going to talk later in the episode, I really like the idea of him as a third line piece with Jeff Carter and whoever the third wheel of that line may be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about him too. And if he doesn't pan out, it's not the end of the world. It's another low risk deal. The only problem that comes from that is that you've got some pretty big offensive issues, at least in your bottom six there, because if he falters, I'm not exactly relying on Bluger and Aston Reese to put up a ton of points this year or drive a ton of offense. I think if Rodriguez ends up in that spot, that he might be able to spark a little bit of more or spark, goal scoring at a little bit more frequent rate than we saw when Tanev was there. But I'm really excited about Heinen. I think he could mesh really well on that third line, and I think they might be able to squeeze a lot more value out of him than what they're going to be paying him.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the last player that we're going to talk about is probably the biggest signing of last week for the Penguins, and it's Brock McGinn. Obviously, had a pretty good career in Carolina, had some big playoff moments, had that double OT winner against the Capitals a few years back. Where do you see him slotting in? Because, I immediately think just throw him with Blueger and Aston Reese, but then there's part of me that's like, okay, maybe he might be a third liner, or maybe more. I'm not really sure what to think of where his place is on this team yet, but I really, really like the player. So
yeah, so when they first signed him, I saw a lot of people on Twitter that were like, "Oh, there's the Tanev replacement," and I don't really see him as a Tanev replacement. I think he's got the potential to offer a little bit more offensively than Tanev does. But like Heinen, I went back and watched some of McGinn's tape, and something I noticed from last season, which was far and away the best season of his career. A lot of the goals he scored were right around the front of the net. They were rebound goals or tap-in goals. And, as we saw last season, the Penguins kind of struggled getting to the front of the net and scoring those kind of dirty goals. Now, they were able to outshoot those issues, but McGinn's going to be bringing something like Carter does, where they're going to be having a couple more guys that aren't afraid to get their noses dirty and get to the front of the net for those tap-in and rebound goals.
interesting. I like that a lot. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. I haven't looked that deep into it because I haven't had a ton of time, but
now
that's exciting.
With that being said, though, last season was a huge outlier for him specifically. The 2 seasons prior to that, there was nothing, that really stood out that was, all like, oh, that's a guy I gotta have. I will say, and a lot of Carolina people can back this up, but he's relentless on the forecheck, and he brings it every shift 110%. So he is similar to Tanev in that regard. But I see him slotting in on that third line right now. I've got him there with Carter and Heinen. I know last year with Carolina, he was kind of playing third wheel with either Jordan Staal or Sebastian Aho. So Carolina had him up in that top 6. I don't know that he'd necessarily be a good fit in the Penguins' top 6 as they're currently constructed. But he's definitely a guy that, can offer something to that third line.
Nice. That's actually really interesting. I think that, having him with Carter would be interesting because similar to what we saw with Jeff Carter when he came into Pittsburgh, it was basically a third line player playing in a situation where he had to be in a top 6 role in Los Angeles, and he just went to that third line role and thrived. I think Brock McGinn has a lot more to give offensively, and he could probably be that perfect complementary depth piece on a third line. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you right there. And, his cap hit's nothing egregious. And even if you do want to say, the intangibles that he's bringing or whatever make up for whatever on ice value isn't there. So, I don't really have any qualms with his contract. And, even if his results don't stay on par with what they were last season, I think he's going to be a nice piece for the bottom 6.
Nice. All right. So moving forward, we're going to talk about Jason Zucker, and we're going to get everybody involved here. We're going to just talk about, Danny just released an article yesterday about how Jason Zucker should play with Sidney Crosby to maximize his value. And I agree. You guys both know that this is something I've been pushing for ever since they went back into the bubble. And I think that, if you put Zucker with Sid, that would be huge, just not from Jason Zucker's own perspective, but like it makes the lineup so much more deeper on paper, knowing that you can get Gensel back with Malkin when everybody's fully healthy. You can get Gensel back with Malkin, and that was a connection that really worked. That like Jake was having the best year of his career playing with Malkin before he had the shoulder surgery, and I mean, going into that game against Ottawa where he took that hit from Thomas Chabot in the corner, like that, he just got named to the All-Star game. Who knows what numbers he could have put up if he were fully healthy. But I think that Gensel with Malkin is something that I want to see again, just simply because, it makes the lineup deeper, and it also will probably help Malkin along at this stage in his career, especially coming off the knee injury.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I had a couple of people that when I posted that article, they were like, "Oh, you're just a Zucker fanboy, and you just want him to play with Crosby." And I'm like, "Well, yes, I am a Zucker fanboy, and I would like him to play with Crosby, but my whole rationale behind this is posturing the Penguins to get the most out of what they have right now." So we know based off of last season that Zucker and Malkin don't have any chemistry together. They visibly didn't have chemistry together. They got absolutely dominated at 5v5 when they were on the ice together. We know they don't work together. So if they're not going to be playing together, your options are to put Zucker on the third line or the first line. And I'm not really all that interested in paying $5.5 million for a guy that's going to play on your second power play, not kill penalties, and play on your third line. And the other reason being is that he's the perfect kind of player to play with Crosby. When they acquired him, I was like, oh my God, like this is the guy they've been waiting for Crosby forever. He's hard on the forecheck. He's good in transition, not because he's, overly crafty or dynamic, but he's really good with those give and go passes off the rush. And as soon as he gets rid of the puck, he goes straight to the front of the net or the back door. And Crosby loves those kinds of players. And, in the small time that they spent together in the 2019-20 season, the results were really, really good when you account for the Jack Johnson factor. And I definitely think that there's more between those two that the Penguins haven't really seen yet.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing that, Dougie and I, we talked about this earlier. I have no problem with Jason Zucker playing with Sidney Crosby. Like you said earlier, Danny, his best hockey in Pittsburgh was whenever he was playing with Sid. I mean, those two were just, peanut butter and jelly, essentially, how well they were clicking together. The only problem with this is I just can't see Sid parting ways with Jake Gensel. I don't see that happening. I mean, one thing that we've always seen with Sid is like, he's never had that true winger beside him, maybe with the exception of Chris Kunitz. He's never had like an all-star caliber winger by his side at all times. Jake Gensel's always been that guy. And I feel like if you move him down the line with Malkin, like, is it really worth it? Is it really going to make that much of a difference? I'd rather see a line of Zucker, Crosby, and Gensel, or maybe just flip-flop the wings, whichever way you want to go about it, as opposed to seeing us throw Dom Simone there again. I get that he's like the analytical darling and everything, but at the same time, it's like you can't play top 6 minutes and only put up 28 points for your career high. That's not going to cut it for me, and it shouldn't cut it for any fan for that matter. I feel like if you're going to do this, let's keep Gensel with Crosby and do Zucker, and maybe try and plug someone else on the top 6. Maybe you throw Kappen in there or someone of that nature, but I just don't see any way they can possibly separate Gensel from Sid. I feel like those two need to be together because they're playing their best when they're together.
Yeah, so the one caveat to the article I wrote was that, all of this hinges on whether or not one, Crosby is willing to, allow Gensel to go off of his line, or whether or not Mike Sullivan would even do such a thing. But, I'm totally fine with throwing Zucker on the right wing with Crosby and Gensel and throwing Rust on the left wing with Malkin and Kapanen. I would be all on board with that, especially if, they're not willing to move Gensel down in favor of Zucker. I'm all on board with that.
And it's like I said earlier, you have these guys that are interchangeable on the top 6. If you want to throw in an Evan Rodriguez, then go for it. If you want to throw in Brock McGinn, obviously we've seen what he can do. Maybe he's a guy that you could potentially throw in that top six. But I just don't see Dom Simone being like that top six option, if you want to put him there. I feel like he'd be a better piece on the Aston Reese and Bluger line potentially. You look at his numbers compared to Tanev, and they're pretty similar. So if you want to go that route, I feel like that'd be the best way of doing it. But like I said, I feel like that'd be the best way for the Penguins to go about doing that.
Now, what I love about this team is just the depth. There's so much depth on this team that I feel like isn't accounted for. And whenever Doug said about throwing Zucker up on the first line to make it more depth, that got me sold. Like Zucker, Crosby, Simone, give Simone another chance on the first line. He does really good with Crosby, like you guys were saying. Then you have Gensel and Malkin. We've seen what they did. I really think that if you throw Zucker on the first line, it's just going to make this roster so much deeper. They're going to put up so many more points, and everyone's going to know what role they need to play, and they're going to execute that role no matter where they're at. There's so many really awesome players on the team, and I know that they can, get their role. So it's like Brock McGinn, like we were talking about. I think he'd be perfect for the third line, like we were talking about. We know that he gets in those in front of the net, and he does really good in front of there. Everyone, like I said, everyone can just play their role. I feel like Simone, give him another chance with Crosby. I feel like he's going to pop off again, and I really do believe that.
Yeah, I like that. I think, and obviously we're getting to a time frame where we probably need to stop comparing like from the cup teams or whatever, but like, in the playoffs in 17, you could tell Mike Sullivan was doing anything he could to maximize the potential of the team. And I mean, so much to the point that like Scott Wilson was playing with Malkin.
The cup clincher in 2017, Hornquist was playing fourth line minutes that night.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, plus think of it this way. Jake Gensel had one of the biggest goals of the cup run, and he started game one of the Nashville series on the fourth line. Like that's the thing. Like I want Mike Sullivan to get back to that point where it's like, he doesn't care how it impacts the player. If it works, make it happen. And in this sense, I think that Zucker, Crosby, and Simone would work. And obviously, we saw this whenever Sid was out a couple years back. Gensel, Malkin, Rust during that time frame when Sid was out was easily the best line in hockey. They have chemistry. They were incredible together. I think that that's something you need to run again. We're getting to a point now in this so-called window where they need to be doing everything they possibly can to get Sid and Gino another cup. They need, I don't care if they need to play. I don't care if Sid has to play the fourth line in order for them to win a Stanley Cup. Just do it. Like if it comes down to it, do it. Obviously that was a crappy analogy or example, but like make it work. I think Jason Zucker and Dominic Simone with Sidney Crosby is fantastic. And, the thing with Malkin being out is he's probably going to come back at a point where you're in the stretch run of the season. So, you do some experimenting and maybe you fall backwards into something great, who knows?
Yeah, and I'm definitely right there with you on, maximizing their cup chances, in the immediate future. And I know Penguins fans especially have been spoiled, during the entire Crosby and Malkin era that, the Penguins are going all in for a cup again. The Penguins just, sold the farm to try and compete this year. We've been hearing that every year. And, it probably loses its luster a little bit, but I think it holds more weight now than it ever has. The NHL over the past couple seasons has become more and more about skill and speed, despite, all these teams that are, especially the Rangers, going after Ryan Reed and going off after all these tough guys. And I'm not saying that, some of that kind of stuff doesn't have any credibility, because it does. But, Malkin's going to be 35 when the season starts. Crosby's going to be 34. I believe Letang will be 34, 35. These guys are generational players and elite players, but, we cannot expect to go into, a cup run with a 37-year-old Crosby and a 38-year-old Malkin. So I really think that they need to do whatever they can right now to try and win another cup with this core. And I'll tell you, to be completely honest, I know Hextall and Burke are really focused on, replenishing some of that depth in the prospect pool and kind of looking forward. But if there was ever a time to not worry about that, it should be now. I could not care less if the Penguins, if the Penguins go on to win another cup in the Crosby Malkin era, I'll be happy if they suck again for another 10, 15 years. That's fine. But I would prefer that over them not winning another cup in the Crosby Malkin era, so that they can be, a 5 or 6 seed perennially in the Eastern Conference. That's not something that's of interest to me. Go all out or go home.
Yeah. And that's my thing, especially like I've been of this way of thinking for a while, especially before free agency started, whenever everybody was talking about goaltending. If it comes down to it and you could get a goaltender, but you have like a goaltender that's clearly better than Tristan Jarry, but you have to give up Poulin or Legare, maybe both, in the case of it potentially being John Gibson, make it happen. Like, just do it. Because, and the same thing I was talking about the same thing whenever, Brandon Saad and Zach Hyman rumors started cycling around the Pittsburgh media market, where it's like, I would rather watch Zach Hyman struggle to play hockey in 2026 if it comes down to the Sid and Gino getting another cup. I can live without Sam Poulin or Nathan Legare if it means they have the goaltender that can get them to where they need to be, because it's obviously clear they probably make a league semifinal run last season with competent goaltending. That team was that good. It's a shame what happened, but like, all they had to do was find a way to crawl their way out of the Islander series. And I still believe Boston would have folded the way they did. And then, things get interesting. So that's what I think. You have to go for broke, man. Like, it's not worth, worrying about like 5 to 7 years down the line, because we know Sid's going to have the longevity factor of his career. We know he's going to be the one who probably outlasts the trio, but we don't know how much longer Letang or Malkin have left, especially Malkin coming off of this injury. We have to see how he looks. I expect him to look better, but like the same thing, you never know. You never truly know. So
yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind, and Legare less so than Poulin, but these are not must-have prospects. These are, I think, Penguins fans, have kind of latched onto them because they're the only names we've really had over the past 3, 4, 5 seasons. Is like, I'm thinking back, who are the Penguins' top prospects? The last one I can think of before them is Kapanen, and he's already been traded for Kessel, and then now he's back with the Penguins. So I think Poulin can become an NHLer. I'm not sold on him becoming, a guy that's going to become a 20-goal scorer, top 6 winger. He very well may become that, but that's not what I see him as right now. And as far as Legare, I'm not convinced he's an NHLer. I know he's got a really good shot, and had that preseason game where he scored 2 goals in like a period or whatever it may be. But as they've been trending, over the past season and a half, 2 seasons, I'm not sold on either one of them being surefire NHLers right now, and that gives you all the more ammunition to move them out to immediately help you.
exactly, and my big thing is like they're both going to hold value. their junior careers stand for themselves. You know, a team is going to value them highly. So why not try and roll the dice and do something to help the team now, you know? And my big thing with Legary is he reminds me so much of Daniel Sprong. Like, it's just like, you know, great junior career, great junior numbers, but doesn't have what it takes to be an NHLer, at least right away. You know, we saw it took Sprong 3 or 4 different teams to develop into a somewhat competent NHL forward, you know, and that's something that, especially if you're the Penguins, that's something that you can't really like take stock in a guy that could potentially end up like that. I mean, I know that all prospects can potentially end up like that, but you know, if it comes down to it, if you have the ability to make a trade to make this team better, like exponentially better, you have to part with them if that's what the cost is.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, if you put Poulant's ceiling, for instance, let's say his ceiling is a 20 goal scoring top 6 winger, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather have that 3-4 years down the line when Crosby and Malkin are already either gone or, you know, not at that elite level anymore? Or would you rather move them for a piece that's going to immediately impact the team and give you a tangible value and tangible positive enforcement on that team? I know what I'm picking every day of the week.
Exactly. Now, in terms of goaltending, I feel like everything's fairly picked over, but like, is there anyone that like you can at least like at least just like spitballing? Is there anyone you could think of that could potentially like be out there? Like that's like I've been trying to think of this, especially ever since Darcy Kemper got traded to Colorado. Like that was my one thing. We had Jesse Marshall on last week, and we talked about Darcy Kemper and about how that might potentially happen, and then literally the day after we released the episode, like gone.
So a couple days ago, or I think it might have even been yesterday, but I was looking at all of the available unrestricted free agent goalies, every single one of them. At this point, there's only a handful. I think I could count on both my hands how many of them even played in the NHL last year. And none of them are under the age of 30, with the exception of 1 or 2 of them. So you're absolutely right that the market has been picked over. But one name that is still there that I am immensely intrigued by, and it would kind of fit right along with our, you know, just don't worry about it later, figure it out now and make it work now. And that's Tuukka Rask. I'm not convinced he's going back to Boston. And I know he's 34 years old, and I know he might be a little expensive, but there's rumors the Penguins are looking to move Pettersson. And if they can do that, I don't see why you can't sign Rask. I'm telling you, man, I might just be overthinking it here and getting myself too excited, but I think they might be able to lure Rask, because I'm not so sure that Boston is interested in bringing him back.
Yeah. Now the issue is he's having hip surgery and he's out until January.
Well,
So
I did not know that.
I wonder if he's going to sign like with anyone to start the season at all. You know, part of me wonders if he's going to be kind of like that Mike Fisher type figure where he's just like chilling in free agency until he gets himself revved up and healthy enough and then signs a deal somewhere, you know? And if that's the case, I'm jumping at it because, you know, with the way that the financial structure of the league is right now, Casey DeSmith is probably going to clear waivers. And that is the perfect number 3 goalie for you. Having DeSmith in the AHL and just running a tandem of Rask and Jarry somehow.
I did not know Rask was having surgery, so that might explain a little more why he hasn't been picked up yet. So that's definitely a factor to consider. But you know, if he does end up going into the season still as a free agent, to see how you know, his rehab plays out, and the Penguins go into the season with that and go in with a little bit of flexibility, that I would be all on board with that.
And it's like you said earlier. Like you said earlier, I mean, we've talked about players that. We talked about players down in juniors, just in the minors, that can be moved, like Poulin and Legare. Marcus Pettersson's on the roster right now, and he is. You want to talk about a guy who can have an impact right now on an NHL team? It's that guy. I mean, he's been so good for the Penguins. A lot of, from what I'm hearing from Elliot Friedman, I guess said this earlier, that a lot of teams like his play and his style. I don't see any reason why you couldn't get a haul for that guy, because clearly there is some interest in the league, and anyone could use a good sized defenseman who can do the things that Pedersen does. So I feel like the Penguins should definitely, take any offers they can on that guy, because obviously there's going to be a lot of interest from teams in the league that can need him.
Yeah, and I'm a bigger Pedersen fan than a lot of Penguins fans are. He's not all that sexy of a player, and oftentimes he's in the corner getting crushed, recovering a dump in, but he's still making that breakout pass, and he's got pretty decent impacts at both ends of the ice. And I think the most important factor here is that he's the one left-handed defenseman that we know plays well with John Marino. Last year, when Marino was paired with Matheson, they were just a tire fire together. And I personally would not be looking to move Pedersen. I'd be doing whatever I can to get Matheson's cap hit off the books. Even if they're getting absolutely nothing in return, that is totally fine. But I'm slightly concerned that the Penguins are planning on going into next season with that second pairing as Marino and Matheson, and I think it's got the potential to be a disaster.
Matheson's got to go. He's really got to go. He's been here. He's overstayed his welcome for sure. We got to get something for, even like you said, even if we can't get anything for him, he has to go. He does not fit on this team, and we got to get someone better for Marino, because Marino's got to develop, and Matheson's just going to keep shooting his potential down.
Yeah, and it's not that I so much hate Matheson either, because, he provides something that the Penguins don't have anything else of on their blue line, and that's a guy that's going to skate the puck all the way up the ice and try to take it right to the front of the net and score. And he did that, one or two times last season. And they don't have a ton of goal scoring on that blue line outside of Letang. So, he definitely offers something that they don't have. But at the same time, if you really value John Marino as your second pairing right-handed defenseman, that, their results last season were not good together. I don't know how you can go into the season, planning on keeping them together.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I value Marcus Pedersen a lot more than the average person, because if he works with John Marino, you need to keep him with John Marino. And I don't think that POJ would work with Marino for the same reason that Matheson doesn't work with Marino. Same type of player, really smooth skater, has great offensive capabilities, but I still have this feeling that him and the POJ and Marino together would get caved in. I think that the winning formula is finding a way to ship out Mike Matheson, regardless of what you get in return. I'm not saying that you attach assets to him, because at this point, even though we were talking about trading assets to get players to improve the roster, at this point, trading assets to move Matheson out would probably be pretty moronic. But the winning formula has to be Dumoulin, Letang, Pedersen, and Marino, and then POJ, and I'd imagine Chad Ruedel. I think that Ruedel's ready to go. I think that he finally needs to get his run as a consistent NHL top six defenseman. He's been phenomenal in the seventh defenseman role for years, and I think that it's time for him to get his due.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, it's probably been time for the past couple of seasons for Ruedel to really get that spot. And obviously he's been a luxury as their seventh D-man anyways, because we know how banged up the Penguins get year after year after year. But I'd feel totally comfortable going into the season with Joseph and Ruedel on that third pairing. I know it's not the most sexy names on that third pairing, and they're probably not going to light the world on fire. But with the Penguins situation, they need to maximize the value out of guys like that so that they can have the resources and cap space to upgrade their team when the opportunity presents itself.
Exactly. And if they did have Matheson off the roster, and they, obviously Aston Reese is extended in this scenario, or at least has a contract to start the year, they'll accrue enough cap space at the deadline where they could make a big move for, whether it be forward, goalie, whatever they need to upgrade at the deadline. And, I'm confident in Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith to at least have you tread water through the first half of the season where you're in a playoff spot. You're one of the top 3 teams in the division. You're in striking distance for home ice in the playoffs.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Jari and DeSmith can, like you said, tread water, and they can definitely get the Penguins to the postseason. But once you're in the postseason, I really don't see either of those guys being a backbone and guys that you can really be like, all right, we got a wall back there, and they don't even have to be a wall, but every time the Islanders were shooting the puck during that series, I was expecting the puck to go in. And, I'm sure the Penguins players felt that as well. And that's going to impact how you play the rest of the game all over the ice, not just in the defensive zone. And, obviously, priority number one is freeing up some cap space to go get a goalie that, theoretically could be pretty above average. We've been talking about for a while now. The Penguins just need to get, average goaltending and they'll get to where they need to be. And they haven't gotten it in that time. And, obviously goaltending super hard to predict, how goalies are going to perform year to year. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But if they can get an established guy that, has shown that he's capable in the postseason, then they have to jump on it.
Yeah. And I can think of an established guy, not really going to say he had phenomenal postseason numbers, but I still and I'm saying this with a major grain of salt, but I still think that this whole thing ends with Fleury somehow ending up back in Pittsburgh.
Oh,
As much as I hate to even say it, Danny, you know me, that I'm a major Matt Murray supporter and that I was on that side of the battle whenever everybody was having a civil war on Twitter. But man, I just don't see Chicago's going to go down the toilet regardless of how much they add, Seth Jones, whatever. He's not really, analytically, he's not a great defenseman. And I don't really think that team's going to be able to keep itself in a playoff spot by the trade deadline. And that makes me wonder if whether or not the Stars are going to somehow align and he's going to end up back here. So I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I would certainly love it for all the feel good emotion and the stories. I'm not necessarily convinced that Fleury's performance going forward is going to be anything close to what he was last year. But the other side of the coin is that even though he hasn't been great in those previous seasons, I think it's 5 of the past 6 seasons he's saved more than what was expected of him. And the same can't be said for Tristan Jarry right now. So, that's an upgrade. And like I said with Rask earlier, it's not a longer term solution, but we're at the point now where throw the longer term solutions out the window. Do what you got to do right now to win. And, even, looking forward to the 2022-23 season, I'm not sure that I'd even want, a 38-year-old Fleury on that roster anyway. But, depending on how the start of the season goes with Chicago, and especially if they're looking to offload him down the line to a contender, I could get on board with it.
Yeah. And another team I think to watch in terms of goaltending, at least right now, obviously they might make a move before the year starts, is Dallas. They have 3 NHL capable goalies on their roster. You have to think that one of Bishop or Hudobin ends up getting moved in some capacity. It just boils down to which one it's going to be and how that's going to go. But that's another one where that would definitely have to be a hockey trade, because I haven't checked Dallas's cap situation recently, but I don't think that they're in the situation where they can retain salary on a guy. So, that would have to be like a, maybe dangle a Marcus Pettersson or some other piece in order to move money out to bring money in.
I've seen some reports that are reading out that Dallas is going to go with the Holtby Ottinger tandem actually. So you have 2 goalies that are getting moved out, Holtby and Hudobin. So you got options there if you really want to get in depth with it. So it's like, which one would you rather have at that point? Would you rather take the chance on Hugh Dobin, or would you want to go back to Hugh Dobin, or would you take the chance on Ben Bishop? Obviously, he's not the same goalie that he was, 4 or 5 years ago, but
Yeah, Bishop's a guy that's intriguing to me. I definitely worry about his injury history, especially him being a bigger goalie. They tend to get hurt more frequently, so that's definitely something to be wary of. And if I had to pick between the two, I'm probably going to pick Hudobin. And if I remember correctly, I believe he was in goal when they went to the Cup 2 seasons ago.
Yep, he was. He was a starter.
Yeah, I was gonna go with Bishop, but I mean, his body's literally just made of glass, so I definitely got to go with Udobin on that.
Plus, the
And
cap hit's a lot more unreasonable.
exactly, like I'd rather have a goalie that's like actually gonna play than just to sit on the bench or sit up in the press box because he's injured. Because we need a goalie. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it comes down to it, you're all in on Hudobin. But good eye, Scotty. That's actually, I'm surprised that they're going to roll with Jake Ottinger to start the year. But like, he was decent for them last year, and I think that he's getting to a point where he's ready to take that next step. But is there anything else that Scotty, Peyton, anything else that you guys want to address?
I feel like we got to talk about the Evander Kane situation.
Yeah, we do.
I mean-
I was trying to avoid it, but yeah.
No hiding from this, Dougie. We got.
I know.
We,
All right. So Evander Kane's wife came out and on Instagram and basically ousted Evander Kane for being an extremely addictive gambler. So much to the point that he's in so deep that he probably can't get out, which is a shame. We saw that pic of him in Vegas probably like 10 years ago now, of him holding like a giant wad of cash. Now I think it all makes sense to an extent. But yeah, this is crazy. Reports came out today that the Sharks players don't want him back in the locker room, and that the Sharks are probably going to start exploring their options to either move Evander Kane or just move on from him altogether. So that's pretty interesting. And it makes you wonder if his career is over at this point.
This is one of those situations where I feel like I honestly could be. We've seen a lot of gambling controversies in the past where players and or coaches just end up losing everything. It goes back even a century to when the Black Sox had their scandal back in 1919, and all of a sudden all those guys were out of baseball. Even more recent, you had Pete Rose, who was banned for gambling. Granted, he wasn't betting against his teams like Evander Kane was, but at the same time, these things have consequences, and it's going to be a very hard time for Evander Kane to try and find his way onto a team, because clearly he's not wanted in San Jose anymore. He's denied the allegations, but it doesn't seem like anyone else is buying it. I mean, I was going off what his wife posted on her Instagram story, and I guess I don't know if this is true or not, but I guess some of his teammates got him a book called Gambling for Dummies. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me either if that was the case. Maybe they're trying to tell him, hey, you're not the best at the tables or whatever. But either way, it just seems like it's the easiest way to end a career. And I kind of understand why Dustin Byfuglien didn't like Evander Kane whenever they were in Winnipeg together. Now it starts to make sense. I mean, someone posted that picture of Byfuglien giving Kane the finger as he was walking past him in the runway one time. And now it's all starting to add up. I'm like, you know what? I kind of get why people didn't like this guy. Every team he has gone to, he's essentially burned the bridge after he's left. It's just what it seems like. And I don't know what he needs in order to figure it out. I don't know if this is a situation that you can figure out, because no matter, I don't think the guy's talented enough to the point where it's like, okay, we can forgive a couple things here or there. It just doesn't seem like that to me. To me, it seems like this guy's a lost cause, and I don't see him being a fit on any team, because who would want that guy on your team, knowing that, hey, he may have an addictive gambling personality, and he might have bet against our team tonight, and he's dogging it in the third period, just so that way we don't score one more goal, and he makes money because of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I have a hard time seeing him fitting in anywhere else unless a team really desperately needs him.
Yeah, he's like actually destroyed all of his credibility. Like I think whoever signs him, just no one needs to sign him. His career needs to be over. This is what he deserves because that it's honestly disgusting that he's underplaying his potential just to make a few extra bucks. You're playing in the NHL, like you should be making millions, but we all know his past, his bankruptcy past, but I just think it's absolutely disgusting, and I don't think he should give another chance at that. He's had plenty, and I think it's time to just part ways altogether.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether the allegations about him betting on Sharks games are true or not, there's a very clear history here of this being a guy that other people don't want to be around, that they don't enjoy him. And, he is a decent player, don't get me wrong, but, at what point is enough is enough? So, I'm sure some GM is probably going to end up taking a gamble on him and trying to overlook that. But, people don't talk about the intangibles in a negative way either. And I think if there's ever a case of that, that's what you're looking at with Kane.
Yeah. And I think that if a team were to take a chance on him, the easiest bet in the world is either the Blackhawks or the Canadians. Just with everything that's been going on recently.
It's going to be the Blackhawks. It's
Imagine it, like opening night this year, top line, Evander Kane with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield.
Ew. Oh,
that causes me pain. But all right, guys, anything else that you got for Danny?
All good.
All right, guys. Well, Danny, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you being here. And you got anything interesting coming up that you want to plug or talk about?
Nothing coming up in the immediate future, although that typically changes pretty quickly. I'll get a hankering to pump something out, and then it's done pretty quickly. So I'm sure you guys will see something here in the near future. But if you guys just want to keep up with any of the hockey work I'm doing, you can follow me on my Twitter. That's at Shirey Irving. And other than that, I don't have anything else for you. I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'd be happy to join you again anytime.
Awesome. Sounds good, man. All right, guys. This was another episode of Forechecking TV. Follow us on Twitter at Forechecking TV. Subscribe to us on YouTube and look for us anywhere you can get your podcast from. All right, guys. Thank you and good night.